So myth number one, COVID-19 vaccines were rushed so they could still be unsafe. So does anyone want to take that on? Okay, Dr. Nellore?
Yes, like Dr. Sharma said earlier, they were not rushed. The technology for development of the vaccine has existed for several years. The biggest limitation of development of a viral vaccine would be knowing what we are trying to target, right? So the viral genome sequencing is something that could delay things because we did not have technology before of sequencing of the viral RNA in this particular case. So we have come in the last 20 years, we have come so far along with sequencing that we've sequenced the entire human DNA right now, right? I mean, the entire human genome is sequenced. So compared to human genome, the viral particle genome is nothing. It's really a small fish. So the genomic sequence is the limiting step for vaccine development in this case. And so since the genomic sequence was done, the rest of the process, since we already know, we have the technology, we could produce the vaccine. The main delay in getting the vaccine into people's arms is not the development of the vaccine, but the clinical trials. We wanted to make sure that it is safe and efficacious. So that's what had to be determined. So that is why it took a little bit longer than 9 months. It would have been even sooner if we didn't have to go through 100,000 people, 100,000 volunteers and check the efficacy and safety. So it's thoroughly vetted. It's done very well. And I am, as an infectious disease physician, having read all the trials, I'm confident that it is done to the point. It was done very well, and there is no lapse, and it is not rushed at any point. In fact, all the Pfizer folks and Moderna folks, I actually spoke to the scientific team, and all the processes were followed very well. And the FDA went through it again, make sure that they did follow all the steps, and certified that. So I feel 100% confident that it is not rushed.
Thank you. Do any other panelists want to jump in on this topic? I'll give another second. You can go ahead and unmute if you want to take a turn.
Just wanted to Dr. Heather. I think one thing I wanted to add, just like Dr. Sharma initially mentioned, Dr. Nino now, just to kind of, this is back in January 10th, 2020, and I think Dr. Sharma mentioned that, is when we first got the sequence of this virus. So the whole year, I think it's way more than, it was enough time for enough volunteers to be on the study and to get a good data out of it. So just like in the first study that was started in US was back in July 27th is 2020. So I think we have had a pretty good data on or safety profile on this vaccine, and then this messenger RNA technology. I think it goes as far as, and I think Dr. mentioned it. I think it's almost 30-year-old, and it has been perfected over a period of time. So, in my mind, even looking into different things, it's not rushed at all. In fact, it's at a point where we can comfortably offer it to the patients with the minimal side effect profiles.
Myth number two, which is you can get COVID-19 from the vaccine. So can we get COVID from the vaccine?
Impossible. It's impossible to get COVID-19 from the vaccine because the vaccine, the Moderna vaccine has 2 mRNA particles and Pfizer has 3 mRNA particles. So essentially they code for a particular type of protein, and the body will develop antibodies against this particular protein. That is, those antibodies are protective. So it does not code for the entire virus. In order for one to get the disease from the vaccine, the mRNA should be able to code for the entire viral particle. And it has absolutely no capacity to do that. So it is impossible to get COVID-19 from the vaccine.
Well, then we will move to myth number 3, which is the vaccines can change your DNA. Anyone that can take that on?
Yes, the vaccine cannot change the DNA because if I think many of you are scientists and had some element of training in biology. So if you look at how the protein synthesis happens, and if you look at the cell biology, the mRNA, when it enters, the mRNA is in a liposomal particle. It enters the cell called APC, antigen processing cell. And once it enters the cell, it attaches to the ribosome, and then the protein molecule comes out. It translates into the protein. That's how these vaccines work. But in order for the mRNA or any RNA to get into DNA, you need to have an enzyme called DNA integrase. So there is a enzyme called integrase that will enable the RNA to integrate itself into the DNA. The vaccine has absolutely no integrase in it. And even if there is an integrase in it, since it's an RNA virus, it does not get into DNA. It has no capacity to attach to the DNA. So it is impossible for the mRNA to enter the nucleus of the cell, which is where the DNA is.
Well said. Thank you.
Kyle, all I want to say is I wish it did and made me a foot taller.
Well, and if I can just say something real quick to kind of simplify it, and that's a great question that people ask, can it, and here's kind of where, again, misinformation comes in. Think about how many sci-fi movies there are out there that somebody gets a vaccine and it changes their DNA. You think about Spider-Man. He gets bit by a spider and he's got spider qualities, right? And all of these other sci-fi movies and spy thriller movies where there's a vaccine that, keep in mind, that movies and science and medicine are two completely different things. And so, it's kind of easy to kind of get sucked into that altered reality of, yeah, that was a great movie. He got stuck with the stuff and, turned into a fly. Well, it changed his DNA, but sci-fi, is sometimes based on medicine, but keep in mind, sci-fi is not real medicine. And so keep in mind, and this is just sort of general public, not knowing, the true medical aspects of how DNA and, all of that stuff works, people can easily kind of just get sucked into this movie fantasy and apply it to reality.
So myth number 4, the COVID-19 vaccines cause infertility. Can anyone take that on?
Yes. COVID-19 cannot cause infertility because it does not enter any of the reproductive cells. And even if they enter the reproductive cells, there is no way of them causing infertility because it doesn't enter the DNA. And so it is what it is. It's a myth. So it doesn't cause infertility.
Thank you. Dr. Sharma, did you want to speak? Yes?
Yes. So
awesome.
let me just say real quick. Keep in mind the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology actually recommended that pregnant women should get this vaccine. Okay. Because what we know is that women who are pregnant are at a higher risk of bad outcomes from COVID. Right? They're automatically in a higher risk category. Keep in mind that although COVID is a respiratory illness, and we routinely think about it as respiratory illness, it has multiple effects through all systems in the body, and it is also a blood clotting illness. We've had a lot of cases where sometimes the first symptoms or signs of COVID may be blood clots, potentially devastating blood clots. And so in part related to that, and in part because pregnant women are at higher risk, and their babies as well, they are recommended to get that. So that's something important to consider.
So myth number 5, you do not have to get vaccinated if you have already had COVID-19. Can anyone take that on?
Yes, that is not true because COVID-19 infection generates a certain set of antibodies, and the vaccine generates a slightly different set of antibodies that are more protective. So it does not protect you. COVID-19 infection, although you have COVID-19 infection, we recommend that you take the vaccine so that you are protected better.
From my standpoint, Kyle, I had a COVID-19 infection back in May, actually. And, our hospital systems were doing the antibody test. And by end of October, I had no antibodies from the infection itself. So I think the how long does the antibody last in our system is actually a question too. And from the vaccine, it has been proven to last longer. Again, we don't have a complete data on it, but the reason for 2 booster doses, I think, is also the fact that the antibodies produced in our bodies are going to last longer than the actual infection itself.
Yes.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, my son, because I'm a nice father, I gave COVID to my son, who's a strapping military guy. His antibodies were gone in 90 days. I still had them 6 months later. So there's no predicting based on age or physical condition or anything else how long those antibodies from the infection last. And I certainly got the vaccine as soon as I possibly could.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. So this leads perfectly into myth number 6, which is once you have been vaccinated, you can no longer spread the virus.
No, that is not true. Well, actually, the data is not very clear on that. But if you get vaccinated, you could still be colonized. Although you may not get clinical symptoms, you may still get colonized in your throat. And there is a possibility that you may still be able to spread the infection, although you may not get sick from it. So it is like younger folks. They have fairly good immunity, and they get the infection, but they don't get sick. But then they go and give it to their grandpas and grandmas. So we we are moving the vaccinated people from one category to similar to the younger category, where they are able to spread the disease without getting infected, without getting the symptoms. So, but the data is not there completely yet, but that is the thinking right now.
We will move to the next one, which is myth number 7. Severe reactions to the COVID-19 vaccines are common.
If I don't want to hog all the questions, so if anybody wants to take it, that's fine.
I'm happy to address this one.
Yes.
Okay.
So you hear about this a lot, and if you listened to CNN or other online news services as your source of medical information, you would think that every second person is having anaphylaxis, and it's not true. Now my data is about a week or so old, but at that point we had administered something like 2.1 million vaccines in the U.S. and out of those 2.1 million vaccinations, approximately 27 people had anaphylactic reactions, of whom something like 21 of them already had a history of anaphylaxis. So you got to think, if someone's showing up with an EpiPen that they already have, that means that they know that they're going to have allergic reactions to many other things, to peanuts, shellfish, all those other things, right? As a result, that's a hardcore person. That's a person thinking, you know what, I probably am going to have anaphylaxis, but I'm taking this vaccine anyway because I believe in this. I believe in protecting my community and protecting myself, right? Hats off to those guys. But the bottom line is, people are not having this at the rate that you would think so. So if you do the calculation, it's something like less than 1,000th of 1% chance. I would say you're better off buying a lottery ticket.
Okay. Are you able to maybe touch on some of the just normal side effects that could be seen from the vaccine?
So what I want to say is, the word side effect actually, I think is a wrong term, and I'll tell you why. Side effects kind of look at, when we talk about side effects, we think about the adverse effects, the things that we don't want to have happen that tell us that something wrong is going on. Sometimes people take ACE inhibitors, type of blood pressure medicine, and they get swelling in the face and throat. That's not it at all. First of all, it's up to about 20% of patients. So the other 80% or so have nothing. I had nothing. And what they can get is about 24 to 48 hours of kind of feeling crappy. You have some, fatigue, weakness, fever, maybe low-grade fever, muscle aches, just, you feel tired, right? And you feel like you're sick. Those are the symptoms of your body generating an immune response, right? That's a good thing. Now, does it mean that the other 80% are not making an immune response? No, it doesn't. It just means that 20% is special. But it doesn't correlate to anything different. It's just you're more sensitive, and that's fine. Most people will have some injection site soreness. My arm was sore the whole weekend after I got my shot. Interestingly, it was worse after the first one than the second one. But what's also interesting is that most people don't get anything. And I think what I had more than anything was anxiety. I sat there the whole weekend wondering when my side effects were going to hit, and they never did. And so I had anxiety more than anything else, but I was fine after that. So, again, you have to consider how bad is that, right? So you're taking, you get some muscle soreness, some weakness, low-grade fever, take some Tylenol, lay down, watch some TV, rest, and you'll be fine versus getting COVID. I don't think the math works out, the math is definitely in favor of getting the vaccination. So that's an easy one.
What is the key difference between Moderna and Pfizer? Is there anyone that wants to take on maybe some of the differences or similarities in the vaccines?
Okay, so Moderna and Pfizer vaccines are very similar. So they are basically they are mRNAs encapsulated within lipid nanoparticles. Okay, so they have lipid nanoparticle. There's something called an S2P antigen. It contains the COVID-19 viral glycoprotein and something called an anchor and a cleavage site. So it's more technical, but it has two of them in Moderna vaccine and then 3 with the Pfizer vaccine. So that's essentially, I don't want to go into a lot of technical details, but Moderna has 2 LNPs with mRNA, and then biotech Pfizer has 3. So essentially, that's the major difference between the 2.
Okay, thank you.
And Kyle, this is Dr. Heather. So
Yes.
I think that was a really good information. And I think a couple of more things. It's like for Pfizer, it's for 16 years and older individual. Moderna advises 18 year old and older. The length of time is a little debatable, but Pfizer, they say 21-day window between the 2 doses. Moderna is saying around 28 days. And just for the lipid, nanoparticles that Dr. was mentioning, Pfizer has to be stored at a much lower, it's like minus 80 degrees centigrade for 5 days to have stable, particles in it. And then Moderna is minus 20. So that's why Moderna vaccine was, easy logistically to operate between, when they were distributing it compared to Pfizer. And then the only other thing is I think it has to do with the vial or the reconstitution of the vaccine itself. So I think for Pfizer, it's like you can, with one vial, you can get up to, there's no dilution needed. There's no other formulation needed. And you can give up to 5 doses of vaccine per vial. But I think for Moderna, there's no changes needed in the vaccine per se. It's like 10 doses per vial. So those are the differences that we were recently shared with, that I'm sharing.
Okay, then my question is, throughout this call, we've been told that we are still going to have to social distance. We're still going to have to wear a mask. We can still spread the virus. Then why take the vaccine? I don't understand why the push is for us to take the vaccine.
Okay, good question. So you're taking vaccine to protect yourself. You're wearing the mask to protect others.
And
understand?
And I wanted
No.
to.
I mean, if I can still get the virus, if I can still spread the virus, why take the vaccine?
Okay, the vaccine, you're taking the vaccine so you will not die of the virus, right? So, but at the same token, there is a chance you could be colonized in your throat and potentially you could spread to others. So that is the reason why you need to wear a mask to protect other people. But vaccine will protect you. You will not get complications from the virus and you will not die from the virus. So that's why you're taking the vaccine. Do you see the distinction there, Didi?
Not really, because if we get complications from the virus, I mean, if we're still spreading it, I mean, I've already had it. I've already been in the hospital with it.
You're not going to get complications from the virus once you're fully immunized. But you could be colonized in your throat. The vaccine does not protect you from being colonized in the throat.
Okay.
You could potentially spread it to your neighbors, your family members, or somebody else you come in contact with, or the residents in your case.
And that's why, Didi, I think the point is the more people that get immunized, the more they're all protected themselves. So if I take the vaccine, but the 4 people I live with don't take the vaccine, I'm protected, but they may not be, right? And me not wearing a mask, me not socially distancing may cause me to spread it to them. But once all 4 of us get vaccinated, then we all have better protection. So until we get to the point where the vaccine is readily available for our population, the general public, and we can protect everybody, we can't get to a place of talking about eradication. So right now it's literally, how do we control death and despair by protecting ourselves? And as each person does that over time, we're going to see better and better outcomes.
Okay.
Also,
Does that help?
And
go ahead.
Go ahead, Aman.
And I think I wanted to what you mentioned, Mira, is the fact that there are several benefits of the vaccine. First thing first, you're protecting yourself. Second thing is you're in a pandemic in which 60% or more of the transmission is happening between people who are completely asymptomatic. They're giving it to other people. And we're at a point where the medical services we are able to provide to the patients, it's totally thinned down. I mean, right now, every hospital is surging, so if by getting a vaccine, you are able to protect yourself from the infection, you're actually helping the community or the population get to a point where we can be considered as the herd immunity. You probably heard of that too. We're trying to get everyone to that point, but right now, the first benefit that we're looking for from the vaccine is to prevent people from getting sick and give them enough immunity so they don't end up in the hospital with several other complications. And this way, slowly, because here's what's going to happen. I think Dr. Nilor can agree with me, is that we had an influenza pandemic in the past and a lot of people got sick, but we started giving flu vaccine to the people. Flu never went away. The same strains are still there, but there's a term called pandemic, which you've heard now. The pandemic infection becomes endemic, which means that it will still be in the community, but it will be at a level where we can actually provide better care to the patients who get sick. Right now, I cannot tell you how many times with the hospital systems being overrun with the patients suffering from COVID. We have had patients who are, I know in my opinion, they are eligible for ICU care, but they're still on the hospital floor, sitting there waiting for the ICU bed, or they were in ICU and they were put in a normal regular room just because they needed a bed for someone else in the ICU. So I think you should look into it as a big picture. Is the fact that you getting a vaccine would allow you or will help you not get sick. If you don't get sick, then there's hopefully you will build up enough antibodies to actually fight it off. And the fact that over a period of time, enough population will have the antibodies for it for us to get to a point where it can give us herd immunity. But for the first thing we are trying to do is prevent the mortality, the morbidity or the complication and the mortality from it. So that's what I think, or when our patients ask me about why should I take it when I don't have to social distance or everything else? I mean, the goal is to get to a point eventually where we don't have to wear a mask and social distance. But remember, you're doing all those measures to not get sick. And, even to the shutdown, why did the shutdown happen? Shutdown happened that the hospital knew that if everyone got infected at the same time, they will not be able to take care of them. And then, this happened last year, but now we are seeing it, that so many people are sick at the exact same time that we're not able to provide the quality care to them. So just kind of look into it as well, or when somebody asks you about that, because that is the eventual goal, is for it to become endemic and people having antibodies for it, and not enough people getting sick at the exact same time for us to not being able to provide good care to them.
Didi, let me ask you this. I can give you an analogy. What do you do? What is your role?
I'm an occupational therapy assistant, and I'm the director of rehab.
Okay, so let me give you an analogy. So when you see patients, you wear gloves, right?
Correct.
Okay, so let's say there is a highly infectious skin condition that the patient has, and you wore the gloves and you touched the patient, right?
Yes.
You did not change the glove and you went to the next room and touched the other patient. The other patient will get it or not?
Yes, they could.
Okay, but will you get it or not?
I could.
No, with a glove, let's say protective gloves.
Okay, no.
Yeah, so that's it. The vaccine is a glove. So you are protecting yourself, but you're not able to protect other people.
Okay.
So that's it. So you gotta be, I mean, unfortunately, nobody likes wearing masks and face shields and walking around, but
sure.
But it's a social responsibility until the pandemic gets to such a low point where it is not a threat. So then we could take off our masks and breathe freely.
Well, and I think that is a misconception, that once we get the vaccine, we can take off the mask, we can take off the gowns, the gloves, all that. And then when, we get on here and you hear this, it's, that's where the questions come in.
Yeah, sure.
And I appreciate y'all explaining that to me. Thank you very much.
Yeah, excellent question, Didi. And it's good. I mean, this is the purpose of the panel, is we want people to be able to ask the tough questions and let the experts help us answer them. Because if you have them, there's probably 100 others on this call who have them too, but just don't feel comfortable asking. So thank you for that. One common question I've seen in the chat is how long does the vaccine protection last? So if I take the vaccine, how long am I good for?
It's a good question, but the recent data suggests that it's probably up to a year protection.
Okay.
But data will tell. I think the further data will emerge and we will know, but preliminarily thinking about a year, at least.
I was wondering, like, is there a age limit, like where it affects somebody worse than others or something? If it was, let's say, if they were under 16 or over 70 or something like that?
Yeah, it is not recommended for people under 16 for one, and then under 18 for the other vaccine, but it's just that it is not tested. It will probably be effective, but it is not tested in those age groups. There is a study going on right now to recruit younger folks to see what the vaccine efficacy is going to be. So right now, or let's say for over 16, people can get it.
Oh,
there's
okay.
no upper age limit.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Anything else, Malik?
No.
Okay. Awesome.
We also had one more question about the effect of the vaccine on somebody's heart who's on Digoxin and has level 2 kidney failure.
No effect.
Like, will it have an effect?
No, it will not have any effect, positive or negative.
Okay.
We've been hearing since COVID-19 has come out, it's been mentioned in both the panel discussions, anyone with underlying health conditions are at higher risk for complications. Do we know why that is? And anyone that has those underlying health conditions. So for example, myself, I have diabetes and high blood pressure, and I'm almost there to where I've made my mind up to take the vaccine. What would you tell someone like myself or anyone else who is still not really sure if they really want to take the vaccine, other than it's going to be more, you're going to have more complications if you contract COVID-19?
Can you afford not to take it? That's my question.
I can't afford not to take it, but I haven't completely made up my mind yet. So
you are poster child for complications. So you are supposed to be taking vaccine because you are at higher risk for developing complications. So you have to take it. This is a must.
So here's an example I'll give you in this situation. Okay, imagine you've got a revolver, right? A gun, and it holds 10 bullets. All right. Well, if you've got high blood pressure, diabetes, and so forth, and you've only, the gun holds 10 bullets, but 8 of them have complications from COVID. Every time you pull the trigger, the chances of you firing that bullet are pretty high, right? It's 8 and 10. However, if you were able to reduce and only have 1 bullet in a chamber and you pulled it 10 times, you got a 1 in 10 chance. Essentially, look at sort of the vaccine reducing your chances of shooting yourself in the foot accidentally. So, it never gets to 0, but you can sure as heck reduce your chances of having something bad happen by pulling the trigger, by taking bullets out of the chamber, because you're going to be getting exposed every single day that you come in contact with somebody that's sticking a bullet in there. What you need to do is find some way to pull the bullet out, especially when you've got underlying conditions like yourself, because that sort of locks you into a higher risk of complications if you do experience the disease. So you, exactly like my colleague mentioned, poster child. If you got underlying conditions, that's really a no-brainer. That is who needs to have the vaccine, and those are the people that are dying because the morbidity and some people just get sniffles, and folks with those underlying conditions end up on ventilators. That's the difference.
Dr. Hayther, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I think, Katrice, that's actually a really good question. I just wanted to kind of say that there are 2 things when we look at different research and, the risk factors and everything. There's something that's considered a cause, means that, like smoking caused the lung cancer. And then there's something called association, or that we have seen that in this population, it causes more mortality, or like Dr. Given said, morbidity. So, there can be the way the COVID-19 is affecting. So with diabetes, even with the best treatment, and you can be compliant with your diet and your treatment, and your hemoglobin A1C is like less than 6.5. You're doing everything possibly you can do, but still very slowly this thing is progressing, with diabetes, and multiple organs are affected. Now, if I go deep into, so let's talk about the kidneys or the heart. With COVID-19, it is such, when it causes this disease, it causes air hunger or oxygen hunger with the organ that is already suffering. And then you put that organ under the stress of not having enough oxygen. Guess what's going to happen? There's a higher chance of them failing compared to a normal organ. And then the second aspect of it, okay, well, the oxygen, the organ was oxygen deprived, even on a cellular level, but the cells may not have died. They may have just been injured. But if they can get the oxygen back after recovering from COVID-19, there's a chance that we can save that cell that is dying. But with diabetes, the response means that the nerves or the nerves within the organs that tells the body that something's wrong is that reflex or that sensation is also inhibited. So there's no good relay system telling the brain that, hey, there's an injury here, so come fix it. So that's why diabetes is such a and it goes into association with everything, and that's where the so I think that's a very good question, but just know that it's all based on how much your organs already have the reserve and how much injury or insult they can take, and what are their chances of recovering from any of the insult that or injury that they suffer from.
And I'd like
Anything else?
yeah, let me add to that.
Go ahead. Yep.
There's a reason that we've prioritized vaccine the way we've done it, right? Take healthcare workers out. So let's say you didn't work in healthcare. It's 65 and above and 65 and below with any health conditions like this. And you've got at least a couple of those, right? So there's a reason. And the reason is that both those groups do badly with COVID. And to folks who say that they're worried about being tracked by the vaccine, I would say that it's not the vaccine that you should be worried about tracking you, it's your phone, okay? So when you're on Facebook and when you have on Instagram and are posting exactly where you are at all times, that's how they know what to sell you. But outside of that, the vaccine isn't going to do that.
Regarding heightened reactions from the COVID vaccine for people, particularly with Graves' disease or other autoimmune diseases. So my question is, if someone has an autoimmune disease, is there any information or any evidence that shows a heightened reaction to the vaccine?
Dr. Nellor, do you think?
Nellor question.
Dr. Nellor, do you think you could take that on?
Yes. Well, there is, again, like previous panelists mentioned, all these things are not studied because they have, on the volunteers, they have eliminated certain populations. And strictly from scientific standpoint, people with autoimmune diseases, if they are on immunosuppressive therapy, when they get the vaccination, their ability to mount antibody response would be lower. So they may not be able to mount an antibody response as efficiently as somebody else would. But having said that, if they are not on any steroids or any immunosuppressive therapy, they will certainly raise an antibody response, but they're not in particularly prone for adverse effects due to their autoimmune disease. Autoimmune disease in no way impacts any side effect profile of the vaccine.
Next, we have Trish Hall.
Thank you. Couple of questions. I have been asked by several of our nurses and aides and different departments also about if you're undergoing the infertility treatments. So that is a real concern among multiples of our staff across Texas that I've heard. The other question was from some nurses and some of our CNAs on breastfeeding mothers. How do you feel about breastfeeding mothers, and is that safe? And the third thing was, I just wanted to share with the group that I have an autoimmune disease, and I did go to my endocrinologist. I am not taking immunosuppressant medication at this time, but she said due to my autoimmune disease that she highly recommended me take the COVID vaccine because I would be hit much, much worse, God forbid, if I got COVID. So I just wanted to share that if it makes anybody feel better, because it made me feel better.
Dr. Givens, do you think that you could take on any of her questions? I think you're muted, my friend.
There we go. Sorry about that.
No problem.
I'll kind of go, I think, the third question and then work backwards. So you mentioned autoimmune disease, immunocompromised. I would put that in the same category as cancer patients and so forth. And currently what's recommended for cancer patients and those who are immunocompromised is absolutely the vaccine is recommended, simply because higher risk. The risk of COVID in that population and the side effects and potential for death is much higher than the potential risk of the vaccine, which is just a mRNA, a protein, that then stimulates the immune system. That being said, also not being an OBGYN, however, if the, for folks who were, I think, breastfeeding, that's not a live virus. There's not an active particle that's going to be, transmitted from, through the breast milk. That would be something that would be, safe for a nursing mother to do. And so I think the recommendation would be that that would also be safe. And then your first question, I forget what that was.
Male staff and female staff asking if the vaccine is safe to take while they are undergoing fertility treatments.
Right. And I would think so, simply because the vaccine's got no, activity within the, spermatic tissue or any of the reproductive organs as far as the vaccine goes. So I would say yes.
Okay, I'm here. I have a question about if the vaccine is going to cover the new strands that they're finding. I read somewhere, I hope that it was a reputable source, that Moderna was already working on a third shot to possibly cover that, but maybe the Pfizer one was covering it, and I would like some more information on that, please.
Great question. Dr. Hayther, do you think you could take that on?
So that's actually a really good question. So right now, I don't think there's a clear data to actually answer that question for you. Pfizer is actually working, and so is Moderna. They're trying to see if it's covered or not. But I want to, initially there was some. So there's a vaccine which has a polyclonal approach. It uses all sorts of immune responses in the body to take on that virus. So initially, some people were saying that the monoclonal antibodies that all the facilities may have heard of, state was pushing it for patients on, who just got diagnosed with COVID-19. They are taking care of, they are forming antibodies just by one way or one method of immune system, or utilizing one way of immune system. But with vaccination, you have polyclonal approach. So they're very hopeful that the same vaccine should be able to cover it. I have not heard it yet as far as the third shot, but I don't know if any other physician have heard of the third shot or anything like that. But I do know that they're looking into it, and I don't think there's a concrete data out there to suggest if they're covering it or not.
Yeah,
So
genotyping different strains and see how efficient this vaccine, the current vaccine is. And they are looking at possibly giving a third sort of a booster dose that would cover these particular strains. So that is not ruled out. That's being worked on right now, but depends on how the different strains spread and the impact that will have on the society. Then the third vaccine potentially will come.
So I want to address this by saying a lot of times I hear this question and sort of couched in, well, since no strains are popping up, why should I even get this vaccine? And the answer to that question is pretty straightforward, which is because this is what we have right now, right? We have the strains that we have right now circulating and causing what 21 million cases in this country so far. 500,000 dead. I mean, so, and that's not from the South African strain or the British strain or the Brazilian strain. That's from our strain, right? So we have an effective tool against this now.
how long does the second dose take to kick in? I know it's not immediate that you get the second dose and you're fully 95% effective or whatever it is. Can any of the physicians kind of express again what that timing is on when the second dose might be effective?
Usually 10 to 14 days.
Okay. I've had Bell's palsy twice. What are the chances that the vaccine will cause me to get this again?
I'll take it. The CDC actually specifically addresses that, and so they did find some cases of Bell's palsy in patients in the trials. But remember, when they look at these things, they say, okay, did that happen more often than people have just Bell's palsy anyway? And the answer was no. And so basically the guidance from the CDC is anybody who's had Bell's palsy can still get the vaccine.
Okay, so how does, this is from one of my therapists that her husband had this, how does monoclonal therapy affect the vaccine, or does it?
It does. So it's interesting. The only reason that they say you absolutely have to wait on vaccination is if you've had the monoclonal antibody infusion, right?
Okay.
Because remember, the vaccine is giving you the ability to make spike protein of your own, and then you make antibodies. So it's like a two-step process inside your body. Now, so if you're making spike protein and you already have antibodies because you got the monoclonal antibody infusion, it's not going to let you make that second step, right? So that's why they say wait 90 days.
Okay.
Right? That's the only reason. It's interesting because like when Donald Trump got his COVID back in late October, early November, and everyone's like, we don't know when he's going to get the vaccine. I could tell you exactly when he's going to get the vaccine because it was going to be 90 days from when he got that antibody infusion. Like you should know that at that point. So it's 90 days from that. After day 91, you can get it, but you have to wait at least 90 days. Now, should you wait a little bit more? I mean, who knows? It's up to you. But the CDC says 90 days after that infusion, then go get vaccinated. Now, if somebody's recently had monoclonal antibodies, you're protected for that period of time, right? First of all, you had it because you had COVID, so you're protected. Those are circulating in the body for some time. And here we are, second week of February. If it's just now, you're going to May, right? By May, we should hopefully have, fingers crossed, widespread availability of vaccine. So, it'll literally be almost on demand at that point, we hope. That's right.
Kind of two questions in one, but I'll ask them both at the same time. I was listening to a podcast with Dr. Paul Offit, and he's actually on the vaccine advisory panel. And he was talking about kind of the immune response that we were all talking about, that some people have these reactions and some people don't. Every time they talk about people that have the reactions, they say, but it's a good thing, your immune system's kicking in. And like, I didn't have any reactions. And so I'm like, did my immune system not kick in quite as well? Like, I'm very glad that I had absolutely no reactions and had a great weekend after both of the shots. But every time I hear someone say it, they always say, but it's a good thing, but it's a good thing. So that, and then right after that, one of the other things he was talking about was to not pre-treat with Tylenol or Advil before or after the vaccine, kind of to let it do its job. And I'd kind of heard that, but I really haven't seen that information out there. But then I hear it from someone that's on the advisory panel. So just kind of where that information is, should we know more about it as far as telling people to pre-treat? The example I thought of was when I took my children to get vaccines, they very often would give them Tylenol and things like that. So it seemed like a natural thing that people would do.
So I would say let me answer the second one first. Dr. Offit is correct. As far as the pre-treatment goes, I mean, that's kind of the current status. That's what we're saying. Again, it's not based on any studies. It's just based on looking at the medical science and making understandings of how these things work. So it's just a better thing. Don't do anything that could potentially blunt the immune response. I would say that if you feel sick enough to take something afterwards, but you don't have to feel that need to prevent something. I mean, whatever your body's going to do is going to do. And to that point, your first point, me neither. I had nothing either, and it doesn't mean anything. It's just that's the way some people are made one way, some people are made the other way.
How long do we have to wait after getting COVID to take the vaccine?
The first thing is clinically if you're feeling better. right? So if someone is still very, very sick, they should wait till they're not sick anymore. But really, how we have that 10-day clearance period for our patients, when 10 or 20 days for the like very critically ill patients who have, complex diseases like renal failure and dialysis, stuff like that. But everybody else, it's 10 days. After 10 days, we take them out of the, PAM unit or the hot unit, whatever. That's the 10 days, right? So let's say that, someone is diagnosed today and they have a vaccine clinic in 2 weeks. They could get that vaccine in 2 weeks, as long as they're out of their 10 days and number two, feeling better, right?